Was the 4-year wait for Euphoria worth it? Jules has always prioritised and centred validation from a man. Rest in peace, Rue. Hello, how are we? Are you well? Are you safe? Are you Euphoria out? Which one is it? For those of you who do not know me, my name is Jord. It's very nice to meet you. You're a bit late to the game, but that's okay. A late comer is still a comer. That wasn't meant to sound the way it did. And for those of you who do know me, hey, how are you? Did you miss me because I missed you? My name is Jord, and this is the Winning Side podcast, but this is Euphoria edition. Euphoria Season 3 edition. I guess the conversation and the question which I want to have today on this podcast is, was Euphoria Season 3 worth the wait? We waited 4 years for this, right? We waited 4 years. All sorts of delays such as COVID, scheduling. Obviously, a lot of the people within Euphoria have become massive within their careers. And I think trying to find a time slot, a time period where they're all available was quite tricky. Notable mentions, obviously, Zendaya, Sydney Sweeney and Jacob Elordi, 3 of the biggest film stars that we have at the moment, like in the world, you know. I think for a long time it was quite uncertain whether or not season 3 was going to happen because there was just such a length of time. Like a 4-year gap is pretty extreme. And I think it got to a point where, like, as Euphoria fans, we just kind of accepted that was it. Sam Levinson has said in interviews before, he always purposely made each season seem like it was the last. I don't know what the reason was behind it, but I guess it's kind of clever because sometimes you have ideas for a future season and it won't get renewed. Sometimes there's a bit of uncertainty as to whether or not people will be available, you know. There's so many contributions as to why a following season may not happen. But yeah, I guess we want to get into the conversation about, was Euphoria Season 3 worth the wait? Okay, so the way that I want to run this down is I want to talk about what I liked about this season, what I didn't like, and then just like a bit of commentary in between. You get it? But stay along for the ride. It's going to be cute. I do and ah quite a lot when I was like prepping because I feel like season 3 of Euphoria has received a lot of criticism, right? But I feel like with some cases you actually can't win. The expectation was so high, I don't think it would have been met, right? We have this, I'm seeing this quite a lot in recent times with these type of shows where like they have a cult fan base so heavily dedicated to the cause, that dedicated that, like, to be honest, a lot of people weren't checking for season 3 halfway through, yet they continue to watch it. Do you know what I mean? That's kind of giving self-sabotage in my opinion. But yeah, it became like Euphoria became a cult classic, and I think a lot of people, just weren't happy with what was given. You know, if we like set the scene a little bit, it's been 5 years since season 2 of Euphoria in Euphoria life, in Euphoria time. That being that they've all graduated from high school. If they were to have gone to college or uni respectively, they've done that. You know, they're now full-time adults, you know, that acting as adults. And I think part of the issue may be the fact that, like, I do think that showcasing a show with a relatively big cast and showcasing the transition from high school to post-grad life is quite difficult. You know, like whether they had like the best writers, the best researchers on the team possible, or the best resources and facilities available, I do really think that transition is quite difficult. People say that it's not an excuse. I don't think it's an excuse, but I think it makes sense. I also think like the gap obviously probably didn't help. But hang on, obviously this isn't me saying it's bad or not. I'm just trying to like reason between like what I've been reading online. A 4-year gap between 2 seasons for a show isn't normal. Like, it just isn't normal. Realistically, yeah, you could do a 4-year run back to back, and that could have been Euphoria done like, what, 3 years ago? I feel like when there's such a big gap and when the actors are so focused on other projects, it starts to lack, or it can lack, like when we watch interviews or when we see discussions circulating from the actors about Euphoria, they all just look so disinterested. They all just look so done. Like when we go on to episode 7 where Nate gets killed, there's some behind the scenes content footage with Jacob Elordi, and he's talking about how like the snake is like cute and cuddly. And at this point, I'm just thinking like, you actually are just done. Like, Jacob Elordi was happy to be killed. And I think in a way, that's probably why Zendaya and Jacob have both been killed. Maybe like, because it only got announced, for context, it is Tuesday. Euphoria came out Monday morning in the UK. We don't know whether or not it was always the final decision for it to end, until recently. I think Sam Levinson said something yesterday, maybe, saying that like Euphoria wasn't being renewed. Also, was he considering like keeping that open? But obviously, because of the demand that Jacob and Zendaya are in, did they think maybe, let's not keep them alive because they won't be able to commit to a season 4, and it would look weird for them to not be in it because they are predominant characters. Well, I don't know about Nate in this season, to be honest. Nate, I don't know what Nate was doing, but Nate was in a different show. That's what it felt like. Okay, so let's talk about what I liked. Okay, so one thing I want to say is I am always going to praise Zendaya. I think Zendaya's performance in Euphoria is absolutely outstanding. I think Zendaya is one of the most talented people we have. I think Zendaya is so deserving of all her success. The way that Zendaya embodies Rue is indescribable, like I feel like when you're that famous and you're that well known, it can be quite hard as a consumer, as an audience member, to detach the actor from the character. But when I see Rue, I don't see Zendaya because she does it so well. Rue was so layered. Rue was so unpredictable. Rue was so emotional. It is an absolute blessing to be alive the same time as Zendaya and to be able to watch her talent evolve and grow. Rue is such a complex character which I truly believe would not be able to be played by many people. But I think it's so apparent and so obvious that Zendaya is so heavily dedicated to her craft. She is so heavily committed to providing the best performance that she can, and she absolutely smashed it. Rue has left a mark on all of us. It's not even up for debate about Zendaya's talent. It's not even a discourse. It's a statement. It's a cultural standpoint. I'm so proud of Zendaya. I'm so excited to see what happens next. I think Rue is the best role that Zendaya has ever played in her career. Her talent is immaculate. She deserves it all. And there were just like certain scenes where I thought, this is just incredible. Zendaya is very good with facial expressions. I feel like a lot of people just kind of like pull her face and hope for the best. But you can really feel it. Like in Rue's last scene when she's passing and when she is hallucinating or having her 7 minutes, if you will, and you see the face that she pulls when she sees her mum, or the face that she pulls where she's ODing and she reaches her hand up into the air and obviously it drops because she loses consciousness. It was just, it got me. It made me emotional. I'm quite a cold person. There's not a lot that makes me feel that type of way inclined. There's not a lot that makes me that way inclined, but I had goosebumps. Her performance was incredible. Let's big up Zendaya forever. I saw this comment online and it was saying, I don't rate Zendaya like that. Zendaya's mid. Zendaya, you're insulting Miss Zendaya. Zendaya Coleman. And I don't mean, come on, let's call a spade a spade. I'm not talking about Shake It Up Zendaya or Spider-Man Zendaya. I'm talking about Euphoria Zendaya. You have well and truly watched all of Euphoria. You have watched Zendaya literally give her life to this role as Rue, and you're trying to say that she's mid. You're crazy. You're deranged. You need help. You need assistance. You need something. Come on, like, let's not do that. It's very distasteful. I know, obviously, like, she's very popular, and sometimes people like to have a controversial opinion to be a bit, like, niche and to be a bit, like, authentic. But, like, come on, don't be dumb. No one is... I will not stand for Zendaya slander. Reel it in, big man. Reel it in. To be honest, I actually... And for all of her faults... and for all of her wrongs, I actually thought Sydney Sweeney did amazing this season. Sometimes, yeah, I feel like when I'm watching Euphoria, I feel like sometimes Sydney Sweeney isn't acting. I'm quite fearful that sometimes, like, Sydney Sweeney is just being herself. The part that got to me was the bit where obviously Cassie has grown a bit of a following because of her OnlyFans, and there's a part where she's being interviewed by Trisha Paytas, which is apparently completely interpreted, right? And there's like a sequence or a part where she goes on about how like men don't have enough rights. It was giving misogynistic basically, and Trisha Paytas literally said we weren't given a script, we just had to roll with it. And I'm thinking, Sydney, is that actually what you think? Are you trying to embody the role of Cassie, or do you genuinely have those opinions? You know, once you find out someone's a MAGA supporter, you have to kind of just be like, ugh. But however, with that being said, because I love the show, I thought, okay, I need to switch off, because even if I don't really mess with Sydney, I do appreciate the vast majority of the rest of the cast. So I thought, let bygones be bygones. I thought Sydney did great this season. You know, I think this is the best version of... is it the best version of Cassie? Cassie continues to be very self-destructive, very self-absorbed. She's a bit of a firecracker, to be honest. She doesn't really help herself, and she doesn't really have much loyalty to anyone, you know? But I think Sydney did it really, really well. The scene that really got to me where I thought, you know what, Sydney Sweeney, yeah, get your awards, collect them, is the part where Nate is in the ground, or Nate's body, shall we say, is in the ground, and Maddie and Cassie open up the coffin, and Cassie breaks down. Sydney Sweeney, give her the awards. Give her the awards. What an outstanding performance. Give her the awards. And I think, to be honest, right, I do feel like this season did get better. I thought at the beginning it was a bit slow and a bit like meh, but like I do think Sydney Sweeney has noticeably had gotten better throughout the season. And to be fair, Sydney Sweeney is really talented. Like, obviously, like, I really don't agree with a lot of the things that she says and does. She's really good at what she does. Did you not watch Housemaid? Incredible. And I think this is the first time in Euphoria where I've been like super, like, massively impressed. I think Sydney Sweeney is... Yeah, I think she's really good at what she does. Yeah, okay, obviously she probably benefits from a bit of pretty privilege and all of that, but she's really good. She's really, really good. Let's not try and play it cool. Let's just admit defeat, innit? Like, yeah. But no, I thought she was great. Shout out to Sydney Sweeney every time. I thought this season did a really good job of paying a tribute to Angus Cloud. Rue's 7 minutes, if you will, on her last scene with Angus was absolutely beautiful. That gorgeous shot of Rue and Fez in the fields, truly wholesome, you know, truly beautiful. Such a subtle, sweet tribute to Angus Cloud. Angus Cloud was incredible. He contributed to a lot of the branding of Euphoria, you know. For all of Sam Levinson's wrongs in this season, I'm really pleased, I'm really glad that someone who contributed such a significant part to the show has been recognized and remembered, you know. And I thought it was really sweet. And even like I really enjoyed how Fez was still an active character, you know, like he gets a mention, you know, he gets mentioned throughout, you know, there's phone calls between himself and Rue, you know, it's nice. And I think obviously because the end of season 2 you can't really figure out what happens to Fez, I guess it kind of like smoothed kind of like smoothly transitioned well, given the circumstances of how season 2 ended, and then also adding on to what happened to Angus Cloud in real life afterwards. Yeah, I thought it was really important, and I'm really glad that it was added, for sure, for sure. But like, tell you what, though, what I like about this show is you actually couldn't predict what was going to happen at all. The fact Rue died the way she does genuinely surprises me, only because so much happened, right? And there were so many missed calls or so many parts where I thought, she's a goner, like she's done out. I'm thinking, how did she make it? Like the bit at the beginning with the apple, the bit where she's dragged from the horse, the bit where Wayne keeps on shooting up the stairs. Rue very much does have 9 lives. Rue very much is like super cat, you know? And to be honest, even though Nate was being like tortured, and I guess that is kind of a foreshadow, I wouldn't have expected Nate to have been killed. Like, I really wouldn't have. I genuinely thought, I didn't think it would get to the point of him being buried, to be honest. But then, like, when we saw that snake, I thought, oh, it's game over, innit? It's game over. But I don't really like the whole, like, conversation about, oh, Nate was trying to do better this season. No, he wasn't. No, he wasn't. Nate is in the situation, not that I agree with what happened to Nate, but Nate was in the situation he was in because of greed, right? Because of greed. And like, maybe I'm missing something, but sell the house. Cassie would make enough money off OnlyFans to put them in a comfortable position sooner or later. I'm just thinking, have I missed something? And okay, maybe it got remortgaged, but even still, that could be like a lump sum. I just feel like, yeah, I don't think Nate was trying to do better. And the fact that Nate only like really subscribed and was on board with Cassie's OnlyFansness when it benefited him, you know? Nate has consistently been selfish and narcissistic and inconsiderate. I do think he did become somewhat softer in this season, but I don't think that's intentional. I think Nate became softer because he was mentally exhausted and at his wit's end. I don't think it was like a gesture of goodwill or like a symbol of like change or anything like that. I genuinely think the reason why Nate became a bit more like mellow this season was because he was just slowly deteriorating. I don't think it has anything to do with like being a good person, being a better person. I just think his time up was pending, and the snake made that very clear. Doing God's work. I will be honest though, I am very jealous of that snake. I wish I could lie on Jacob Elordi. What a beautiful man. Do you know what? Yeah. You know, like when someone isn't a bit of you, but you're like, do you know what? I probably would. That is how I feel. That is how I feel about Jacob Elordi. Like 6'5". Are you crazy? Oh, I'd melt. I would melt. I would. Oh God. Kendall Jenner is such a lucky lady. Do you get it? I thought Laurie was very interesting this season. Laurie has always had like quite like a harsh approach. Laurie has always been quite cold. Laurie has always been quite like bricklayered. Like, you know, she's always been quite like surface level. I actually think this is the first time we see, I don't think intimate is the right word, but I think this is the first time we see Laurie be a bit scared. You know, we see the interactions with Alamo where like she obviously doesn't know where to place herself. And the bit that really got to me was when obviously they'd all been found out and like the helicopters and the police were surrounding the house. And you see it where Laurie says, I can't go to prison, right? Because I don't think Laurie isn't like a violent person. Laurie obviously has like a lot of people that work for her that do the work. And it just like kind of switched up my whole take. I was like, oh my God, she is really, because a lot of the time she doesn't come across very humane. And it's like I said, it's the bit where she's like, where she like just says to herself, I can't go to prison, and she hangs herself, you know? I've always like perceived Laurie to be quite a bad bee. I've always perceived Laurie to be quite a badass, you know? I thought she'd be the type of girl to be like calling the rounds in the cells, but actually she can't hack it. And I just thought like, I was just like really surprised at how we got to see this like scared side of Laurie. Laurie is usually the one scaring people, but in season 3, it's very much like Laurie is scared herself. I don't know. I just thought it was really interesting. And again, I guess this is also like kind of like an indication at the end of this like Euphoria run, because like people are tired. People are they're wound up. People are ready for a timeout. I would say that the new characters were a good addition. It's very common for new characters to be added in the final season of a show, and a lot of the time it just doesn't work. And I'm like, do you know what? Stick with the OGs. It's a waste of screen time, but it added to the story. It wouldn't really. I mean, I don't know what the alternative would have been, but I thoroughly enjoyed a lot of these new characters. Alamo, I thought was great. Bishop, I love Bishop, man. I'm like praying. I'm like praying in a hypothetical world that Bishop and Maddie are together. Faye's a snake, but I actually do like the character. Wayne, hit or miss. Like, I'll cope without. I feel like Angel should have been explored more. I liked Angel. I think there could have been a lot more to her that needed to be discussed, but that didn't really land. I also feel like Ali had more of a presence this season. Ali's always felt like a background character to me. And I don't know if that's because it's been so long since I've watched Euphoria season 1 and 2 that I can't remember. I know obviously he's always been Rue's mentor, but it felt like this was the first time that we got a background story. It felt like the first time this was when we got a bit more coverage. I feel like, yeah. And it's really like wholesome and sweet how like Ali will really like ride for Rue. Ali will really do the most for Rue. It's the bit where he refers to Rue as his daughter. I think, oh Jesus, don't make me cry. Do not make me cry. I can't hack it. I can't hack it. I can't hack it. Euphoria has always been like very like well known for like this kind of like gritty theme with this colourful psychedelic aesthetic, right? And obviously that's been the case for season 1 and 2. Season 3 was very much like gritty, pure, minimal glitter, minimal delusion, and I think that might be a reflection of the time period. With that being said, I feel like this whole like glitter aesthetic, this whole like Delulu is more surrounding, or is more based on what they're like. Season 1 and season 2, they're high school students, yeah? I think that is a reflection of them being a bit deluded, a bit naive, a bit unsure on what's what and what isn't, yeah? Whereas season 3, we are in pre-graduation time period, yeah? Pre-graduation time period where we are a bit more... Things are a bit more realistic. Things feel a bit more real, The issues which took place in high school are very unnecessary and are very irrelevant to the current time period, And I think, yeah, I don't know if it was intentional. I don't know if it was just because budget cuts. I don't know what it was, but I think it made a lot of sense. I was like, yeah, we've kind of left this idea of it being so like teehee and cute and pretty, and now it's like, no, this is raw, this is real, this is what I want to deliver, and this is how it runs. That's how I saw it anyway. I was really rooting for Rue. I was so proud of her. Like, Rue was sober for the whole season. The whole season, bro. Rue really wanted to do better. And I'm like, I hate this like conversation online. Oh, Rue was a drug addict. She died from overdose. No, she didn't. Rue did not die from an overdose. Rue was murdered. These so-called meds that Alamo gave Rue was laced, purposely given to Rue, knowing that she would take them and knowing that it would make her body shut down. Let's cut this narrative. Rue did not OD, okay? Rue did not, well, I mean, I guess she kind of did technically, but she was, Rue is dead because she was killed, right? It's not the same, and I'm so frustrated because Rue was doing so well. I feel like it like really showed that she has come such a long way, despite being surrounded by a lot of temptation and urges still, like Rue's focus was getting clean and getting safe and being with Jules. That was the primary end goal, Rue isn't stupid. She knows that if she effed up, Jules wouldn't have it. You know, even though I don't think Jules would go for it anyway, to be honest. But that's for later on. You know, like let's leave it. Rue did not deserve what happened to her. She really did. I mean, Rue doesn't deserve half the things that happened to her. But like, do you know what I mean? Like, I'm frustrated and annoyed because I just think to myself, this isn't your fault. But at the same time, I do feel like Rue is quite a clever girl, and it doesn't really make sense how she didn't understand what Alamo was doing. I don't know. I was just like, thing is, like, we all knew, even before season 3 came out, we all knew that Rue was going to die. We all knew that Rue wasn't going to make it out cute. Like, we all, like, you know, like, it just wouldn't wrap up. It wouldn't land. But like, I'm just upset because I just think to myself, in an ideal hypothetical world, Rue and Jules would be together. Do you understand? Rue and Jules would be a unit. But Sam Levinson quite clearly didn't want that, so never mind. Rest in peace, Rue. Can I just say, yeah, I am absolutely obsessed with Ali. I am obsessed with Ali. Like, the way that Ali will ride for Rue says it all. It is very much a father-daughter relationship. And I guess in a way you could argue that Ali has become the replacement to Rue's dad, or did become the replacement to Rue's dad. The way that Ali is able or will do the most to provide justice for Rue. Bro, I've got friends that won't even text me back. What do you mean you're going to go to the venue of where the murderer lives to shoot him up and anyone else that gets in between it? That's gagged. That's incredible. Seeing the way that Ali loves Rue so much like a daughter, you know, it's wholesome. And I just feel like it really does show how significant Rue was to him, to his, maybe to his own journey of recovery. It doesn't feel, and I know it's been a few months after, it doesn't feel like there's been that much effect from Rue's absence, from Rue's passing, from what we saw anyway. Maybe parts were cut, but it feels like the only person who is really struggling to get on with it is Ali. You know, if we talk about Lexi real quick, I want to say that Lexi had like a little bit of a redemption era. I feel, because Lexi is like very negative for the whole season. I'm like, girl, calm down. Things really aren't that bad. Like, you're probably the most stable out of everyone. Do you know what I mean? I know it's not a competition, but if it was, Lexi would win. I feel like, and this could be a bit of a wild theory, I feel like Lexi is the way she is in season 3 because of Fez's absence. We don't really ever see that like intimate romantic side of Lexi. And I think Fez opened up a door that she hasn't experienced before. I feel like the way that she's quite rigid and quite stuck up, I think is a response to the grief of Fez. I think if circumstances were different, I think in season 3, Lexi and Fez would be together. I think that was the vision. I think that was the idea. You know, when we roll it back and we see the way they interact, and it's so genuine and so sweet and so wholesome, you know, and really, it's real. It's really real. I really think that Lexi and Fez would have been together. And I feel like Lexi subconsciously feels that way. And I think when she is having to deal with things that really aren't that important, she has quite an aggressive approach, because deep down, her responses to all of this and all of those people is her way of dealing with not having Fez. You know, I truly do believe that if Angus was still with us, Lexi and Fez would be together. I really do. Lexi was just like so angry for all of it, and I thought, girl, calm down. But I really enjoyed the scene between Maddie and Lexi, where like Lexi quite clearly feels guilty and all of this. And then Cassie and Lexi, yeah. And to be fair to Cassie is like, she was an addict, it wasn't your fault. Probably one of the more sincere comments and moments from Cassie in this season. And then she goes on to say she has a nice smile, which I thought was quite sweet. I thought, oh, Sydney, Zendaya still doesn't like you, but like, do what you need to do. Do what you need to do, baby girl. I am glad it ended like that because I feel like it kind of gave Lexi a bit of a redemption era, whereas before it was just like, before it just wasn't cute, it just wasn't sweet, and it just wasn't it, to be honest. But yeah, I'm glad Lexi had that moment because I think until then, it just this season just didn't paint her in a positive light at all. And I get she's meant to be like the voice of the people, the voice of the audience, but at the same time, I'm like, babe, chill, relax, shake a leg, keep it moving, bounce, or whatever it is that you do to make things make you grin. Like, yeah. I do think Maud is very talented, though. I really do like Maud, to be fair. I love Bishop. I love Bishop. Bishop's like quite... I don't even want, like when like people will typically be like, oh, he's such a complex character. I actually like, because there's no backstory, I actually can't comment too much. I'm just obsessed with how like he went against Alamo. I was like, yeah, you do that, man. And I'm kind of like hoping in like a hypothetical world that that Bishop and Maddie would be together. Like you see like a moment in the car on the way to the club with the dog and the girlfriend, and then when Bishop's like, it's a boy, I don't know. And then when Bishop asks Maddie if she needs a lift home, I'm feeling hopeful that like if there was ever a spin-off for whatever reason, the two of them would be together. That's my gag. That's what I'm hoping for anyway. I think that the most purest love story in Euphoria is Cassie and Maddie. Maddie has proven simultaneously how much she loves Cassie, We see it in the scene where she practically begs Alamo to help her out, knowing that he's the only one that can provide what she needs, I'm not being funny, yeah? If I had a friend like Cassie, send the ashes my way. Do you get? I think because it's a bit confusing, yeah, because you can't really, throughout the season, you can't really figure out whether the friendship's genuine, especially on like, well, I don't think it's genuine from Cassie's side, to be fair. I actually think that moment where like Maddie is willing to risk it all is when Cassie switched up, like, oh, yo, like Maddie really has my back. I have to back her. But like you can't really tell with Maddie because obviously Maddie has the contract. Maddie can be quite aggressive with her. I don't know. Yeah, I couldn't really figure it out, but like this made it quite clear, I do think that Cassie and Maddie are soulmates. I think their love story is probably the most genuine out of the whole cast. I think that also shows how complex like a platonic relationship between best friends can be. Cassie well and truly broke Maddie's heart, understandably, and then yet she's the one who did the heartbreak, and she's also the one who reached out years later. I think they were destined to be together as best friends, And I think the final episode, the last two episodes, really proved how much they truly do ride for each other. Okay, so there's one last thing that I want to talk about that I really liked. I'm really appreciating Rue's relationship with God. I feel like if Rue didn't have her relationship with God, she wouldn't have lasted as long as she did. Obviously, like being of faith and having a belief provides a lot of comfort, a lot of safety. And I think that allowed Rue to escape, I think when the going got tough and when she didn't know where to be directed to or what to do, I think the comfort of Christ kept her going. I truly believe that, I really do not think Rue would have made it for as long as she did if she didn't have God. It kept her going, like with this situation with Alamo, with the apple, with the situation with the burning car, like I do think that God's presence and assistance has been a real clear signifier and support system and facility for season 3 for Rue. It kept her going. I think it allowed her to have hope when things weren't looking too hopeful, when things were dark. It allowed Rue to continue to do what she was doing, and I think that's really beautiful. And yeah, I don't think Rue would have made it for as long as she did without God's presence. God, that was long. Okay, so we're going to talk about what I didn't like. It doesn't feel like anyone's thriving in this season. I don't know if that's meant to be like a harsh reality of what adult life is like, but there isn't anyone that I can watch and think, oh my God, like you're living your best life, you're living a high life, a fast life. Like I don't feel that way about anybody. I'm just like, is this meant to be about us? Is this meant to be about how adulthood is rough? Is this a reflection? Granted, like maybe minus trafficking, substance abuse, OnlyFans, like all of that, because those are things that do happen, but I don't think it's applicable to like the vast majority of the adult population throughout the globe, But like I'm just there like, when are we going to get to a point of pleasure? When are we going to get to a point of joy? Do you know what I mean? And obviously Euphoria isn't a happy show. And I guess maybe that's a reflection of the current state of the world. Yeah, I just feel like no one's thriving, babe. I just feel like no one's thriving. But I don't know, maybe that's just how the world's meant to be in your 20s. Your 20s is rough, but that's a conversation for another day. There's a lot of characters that just have been forgotten, which just doesn't make sense. Like, and that's from seasons before and now. Like, what happened to Ashtray? Why is he not mentioned? What happens to Faye and Wayne when they run off, What happens to Rue's mum? Why does nobody know about what happened to Nate, There's so many unanswered questions, and I don't think it's effective. I think it's just a bit weird. Why do we not capture any reactions of Rue's passing? And I don't know whether this was meant to be intentional or not, but I just find it a bit strange. Like, so much happens that affects so many characters, but yet we don't get to see it. Like, what gives? What's the reason behind it? I just don't get it. Like, I feel like I'm missing something. I feel like I thought I was going crazy. I thought there's so much that happens but doesn't get discussed. And I don't know. I feel like it's a bit of a lazy move, really. Like, it just doesn't make sense. Not everything needs to be like hidden or like secretive. Be loud and direct and just tell me what has happened to these characters. Yeah. Not the best move. There's also this, like, I feel like Sam Levinson has like a real like kink fetish, because there's so much, the women are so heavily, overly sexualized in this season. And obviously, like, I get like the environment which they're in, it makes sense they'd be that way. But sometimes I think it's a bit excessive, and it gets to the point where I'm kind of like, do these women not have personalities? It almost kind of like suggests that these women are just seen and used and abused for their bodies, and I do get that is a reflection of like reality sometimes, but I just feel like there's more to them, and I don't think it portrays the best example, in my opinion. I just feel like I want more for these women. I want more for these women than just being like doing what they're doing. Obviously, I'm so pro sex work. I think sex work I'm for it. I'm so for it. But like, these women have stories. These women have narratives. So why are we not bringing that to the table? I'll be really honest. I really wanted more for Jules. Jules, honestly, it almost feels like Jules's mentality and her mindset hasn't shifted since season 1. Jules has always prioritized and centered validation from a man. That's always been the case. It hasn't switched. It hasn't changed. And I feel like when we watch season 3, from an outsider, Jules is living like the high life, she's living a life of luxury and leisure, she's well looked after, but she's trapped, it's a conditioned agreement. Yes, she has like certain privileges, but at what cost? Okay, Rue isn't able to provide the same level of expense or treatment that Jules' sugar daddy can, but it's genuine love, Rue has been riding for Jules from day dot, when, to be honest, Jules probably didn't deserve it. She probably didn't deserve it. And that still isn't enough, Rue offers it on a plate, loud and clear, no sugarcoating, no playing hard to get, just very, very, I want you, so why don't you want me? And it still isn't enough, you know? I do appreciate and I understand that this conversation and this subject surrounding male validation tends to be something very common for the trans female experience. But I just feel like this could have been a really good opportunity to provide more. Why don't we change the narrative? Why don't we switch up and change the way in which trans women are treated, or how they develop, or how they can be developed? You know, I wanted to see trans joy. You know, I wanted to see Jules's freedom, creative freedom. Even if she was in like a dead-end job, not doing what she liked, at least she'd be free. You know, Jules hasn't been free for the entirety of this show. And I just feel like this could have been a really great opportunity to finally let her do what she wanted to do without being restrained from a man or by a man. You know, that's what I wanted for Jules. I feel like this, like, obviously isn't very controversial, but like season 3 of Euphoria really lacked without Labyrinth's music. I think Labyrinth's music is truly fantastic. Labyrinth's music it's enchanting, you know, it's enchanting, it's cinematic, it's mythical, and it's electric. The way that his music transcends and truly puts you in that Euphoria vision, you know, it's a skill set which is really rare. I think Labyrinth successfully made music which was so perfectly suited to Euphoria, you know. Labyrinth's soundtrack and music contributed to Euphoria's success. I don't think Euphoria would be as successful as it was without Labyrinth's music, you know. I like Hans Zimmer. I respect him dearly in his career and his achievements. However, Labyrinth is the blueprint for Euphoria, you know. Season 3 may have even been received better if Labyrinth's music was there. There were certain scenes that I was watching, yeah, and I thought, I need give it for all of us, give it for all of us. And I'm just thinking, I don't know what Sam Levinson did, but like, you fumbled, you know. There's no full picture of Euphoria without Labyrinth. Hate to say it. It feels like a lot of the characters are in different shows. Like, it's not normal for this many characters to just not cross each other at all. Like, obviously, I really do appreciate how, like, certain characters don't get on. Obviously, it's been made very clear that Zendaya does not check for Sydney. Zendaya does not check for Jacob. Apparently, Hunter and Jacob don't get on either. But I just feel like, for the sake of a check, for the sake of a job, can't you just pattern up? Do you know what I mean? Obviously, like, I get that Zendaya is so powerful that she can probably, like, be her own boss and make her own decisions. But I just feel like the only reason why it kind of worked somewhat is because Rue doesn't really have that much of a rapport with Cassie or Nate. So it kind of worked. But I feel like also it's a missed opportunity where there could have been some, like, fun interactions in between which could have added to the layers. Because obviously, like, everything is, like, online now so heavily and so highly accessible, we know, like, the background which has gone on behind the scenes, right? And I don't know if that contributed to, like, the awkwardness or the disliking. I don't know. I feel like it would have been really respectable from an outsider if we had have just seen them interact, you know? I think there's a scene where, like, Rue and Cassie are sat with each other. They're not talking, but they're sat with each other. And there's a bit where, like, Rue knocks on Cassie's door, but, like, that's it. Like, that's just it. I really wish we had have seen more of the aftermath. You know, I would have liked to, I don't really understand what the reason is, but I would have liked to have seen how people reacted to Nate's death. I would have really, really liked to have seen how people responded to Rue's death. I get, obviously, sometimes people like to keep the illusion alive. I actually don't feel that way. I would actually quite happily just, like, give me, like, a core, hardcore, raw response. Let me see people break down, you know. I thought this transition to this full-time gritty season was meant to be gritty across the board, and if that's the case, why are we not seeing people respond to Rue's passing? Why are we not seeing people bar Maddie and Cassie respond to Nate's passing? You know, I just feel like it was a missed opportunity. I would have really liked to have seen a conversation take place between Maddie and Nate. Like, I don't know. I feel like it was always Maddie and Nate, you know? Cassie was the backup because Maddie was unwilling to put up with Nate's crap like Cassie would, you know? It's always been Maddie. You know, even when Cassie tells Nate that she's meeting Maddie, Nate's response is, my Maddie, to which Cassie says she was my best friend, you know? Nate wasn't with Cassie because he loves her. Nate was with Cassie because he's settling, because Maddie won't put up with what Cassie will. That's the difference, you know? Obviously, like, I understand that she left the show. I feel like I feel like Cassie's story with the OnlyFans is probably what would have happened to Kat. Like, I'm under the presumption that is what would have happened, right? Like, I could be wrong. The way that Kat's story was in season 1 with, like, the webcam stuff, okay, it kind of got abandoned in season 2, but that's because of issues with Sam. I think that, yeah, I'm under the presumption that would have been what it was. Obviously, like, I know that isn't really a fair criticism because Barbie wasn't in season 3, but I feel like it would have landed really well. And I'm under the presumption that storyline was initially meant for her, but obviously I think a lot of loose ends just had to be, like, screwed up. It's a bit with, like, how apparently, like, Jules was actually meant to be with Nate, but that obviously went south because Hunter and Jacob don't get on. So Hunter was like, I'm not working with him. Honestly, this cast is so entitled. Like, imagine, I wish... Okay, so I have a couple of notes left, which I'm going to quickly go through. I would have liked to have seen more dialogue from Rue's mum. I feel like realistically, Rue's mum is the person Leslie, who should have been, like, the most heavily affected from Rue's passing. And we get like minor low volume dialogue on a phone call. Like, I just don't understand why it just feels like so much is missing. I feel like I'm repeating myself like a parrot. It just feels like so much is missing. Like, why? Like this whole, like, minimal aesthetic, it doesn't land. It doesn't work. Like, there's a lot that just needed to be included, you know? Honestly, HBO, cash me a check, right? I won't direct because I'm not there yet, but I will be the brainstormer. I'll do it for like a 16th, a 32th, a 64th of what Sam Levinson's being paid. Honestly, like, there's just so much missing. There's so much that doesn't add up. There's so much that doesn't make sense. Why is there so many gaps? Is that intentional? Because if that's intentional, that's really weird. Why can't you just make it clear? Like, I don't know. Maybe I've missed something. Maybe I need to rewatch. Maybe I need to do, like, a second podcast on this and be like, oh, actually, guys, I fumbled the bag here. I didn't really get it because of my own, like, fault. I don't know. Let me know in the comments. There's 2 more points I want to make. The first point is, I really hate that Rue's final interactions with Lexi and Jules were both quite negative. I feel like Rue has been through quite a lot. And also, why was Lexi not in her 7 minutes? I was looking at that a bit sideways. Lexi's the most loyal friend that Rue had. I feel like with regards to someone passing, hypothetically, you would want your last interaction to be somewhat positive or nice. And it just makes me quite, I don't know, this season's just quite negative, isn't it? Like, it's not happy. I mean, there's not much more to say other than that. I just really wish it had been more positive. I feel like queerness in Euphoria just isn't presented in a very positive way at all. I feel like queerness is presented in a pessimistic manner. You know, when we look at Cal Jacobs, he actually looks a bit too happy when he's talking about the things that he shouldn't have been doing. When we see the way that Jules is treated, you know, that doesn't really shine light on queerness in a good way. And then when we look at the interactions between Jules and Rue is literally, like, doing the most to tell Jules how much she wants her. And it still isn't enough. What do you mean? Someone who you have loved since you were a teenager is literally saying, let's be together. I want you and I know that you want me. So why is this so difficult? Why are we chasing? We're in our 20s. Why are we chasing? You know, I don't know. I just feel like I would love to see a positive queer story in this, or a positive queer character. It's all just very, like, confused, misunderstood, and, like, unguided. I'm just thinking, shine a light. Shine a light. That's all I've got to say on that one. Okay, so I guess to answer the question, Was the 4-year wait for Euphoria worth it? No, I don't think it was. And when I say that, I don't think season 3 was unenjoyable. I genuinely thought it was okay. I think the reception it's receiving is really unfair, but it wasn't worth the wait. It wasn't. It wasn't worth the wait because due to Rue's previous antics, it was inevitable she was going to die. Granted, I didn't think it was going to happen the way that it did, but it did. I think it's so obvious that so many actors had just lost interest, you know. We get that, not so much from the acting. I think the acting was really good across the board, to be honest. But we get that through press, through interviews, you know, they all look very discouraged and very fed up. Press for a season, especially as highly anticipated as Euphoria, should be like buzzing, you know, it should be exciting, you know. Even when I see Zendaya saying goodbye to the crew, like none of the cast are in it. Like, what do you mean? And I just think like maybe it would have landed differently and been received differently if it was like released 2 years ago or 3 years ago. The show is good. You know, Euphoria is a staple in Gen Z representation. Not accurate representation, but still representation. You know, Zendaya is and will always be phenomenal. Sydney Sweeney killed it. Jacob Elordi, pass. Hunter just wasn't in it. I like Alexa. I think she's really good. I think she's a goat. And yeah, I like Maud. Euphoria is a good show. And I do truly believe that if that season alone was a separate season that wasn't Euphoria and wasn't being based on the previous 2 seasons before, it would be received very, very differently, you know. I do enjoy this show. I'm proud of this show. I don't think the ending was bad. You know, I'm kind of glad that Rue passed on her own terms and not like in severe pain as to be expected. But yeah, I think I'm glad it's come to an end. Yeah, it's good, but I do not think it was worth the wait. Yeah, that's where I'm at. So I love this show. I really love this show, and I hope the legacy for it continues to be the way it has been. And yeah, long live Euphoria, right? My name is Jord Hellwood. This is the Winning Side podcast. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you soon. All right?